Okay, so the topic at hand is paging controls on the front end. And so it all starts with a listing route on our back end. And so in our project, in this case is a Retro Amazon, we're just showing a list of books. And you have to have some permissions as a user to list the books. And then we have this route that, again, we probably coded a month ago on our back end, where there's a aggregation pipeline, and we hit our book collection and send back a result set of books. Now, one thing, if you've been following along with this project, one thing that I changed on my back end, so we're going to do paging controls, and these paging controls are on the front end, and I've already coded these, which is different than normal. So I'm just going to be highlighting the code that I wrote. One thing that is definitely different on the back end is I wrote this line here. You can use common sense to kind of tell you what's going on. Of course, we're hitting our book collection, and there's a count documents based on the match, which the match is our filter, right? So if we're filtering out books, we're basically doing a count of the books that meet this filter criteria. Okay, and so I refactored this backend to send not only the books back in a books property, but also a total count property, which you know, although our query might only return 5 books, total count is going to return the total count of all the books. And so that was something that I needed on the back end, so that I could use this total count property on the front end. Starting with that refactoring of the back end into the front end. Again, if you've been following along, you should probably take a look at my repository. All this code is pushed and up to date on my repo. But let's kind of start with the use effect hook. Okay, now inside of use effect, which this is done on the page mount or when the delete counter is modified. So the page mounts and use effect will run, or use effect will run anytime this hook modifies its value. Inside of use effect, I kind of define this function here and then call the function. The reason you might choose to do this, which is define a function and call the function, would be if this function was asynchronous. However, you'll notice here I didn't even write an asynchronous function here. So frankly, I could just call this, I could get rid of this function and I could just run this code, not being inside of a function, so that function call is kind of not really serving me any purpose unless it was asynchronous. But nonetheless, here's a function, we call the function. And I had to write a separate function because I was kind of getting caught in a place yesterday where I was using one function for both the page load and then a filter. And that one function, well, there needs to be 2 different kind of chunks of code. The first chunk of code is like getting the initial books, and then any other showing of books needed to be like a filtered set of books. So initial books is kind of like your select star, give me all the books. And then, this other function that I wrote is fetch books is going to be not all the books, but a subset of books. So, the first thing I had to do here is like, okay, let's just do a select star. Let's hit our back end, the book list, give it some credentials. And really, initially, all we're saying is that there's a page size of 3 and page number of 1. Keep in mind, these are both variables that are accepted by the back end. If I go to the back end, page size and page number come from rec.query. Okay, so page size and page number can be configured inside of params. Now this is just kind of the default page size of 3, page number of 1. Okay, so select star, giving it a default page size and default page number. Then we're setting my, all the books here. So we got a hook for books, so none of that has changed. We set total pages, and here's where I use total count. The total number of pages is the total count divided by 3 per page, and then rounding up, right? So that's going to, if you've got 16 books, right? Well, 3 goes into 16 5 times with a remainder, so it rounds up to 6. So it would be 6 total pages in that example. And then we set the current page to 1. So you're going to see 2 hooks here, one for total pages and one for current page. So pretty simple use effect here. Just getting all books, again, pointing out the difference is that I have now this total count. And just to demonstrate this use effect working as it boots up, let me boot up my back end. Okay, so we're running on localhost and npm run dev. And localhost 5173. Okay, log in to see the books, which is what we would expect. Type the right password. Okay, so here we go. We have the initial books loading, and you will see the paging controls. Now we haven't gone through this, and what is the markup to get this showing, but I did just want to show the books loading. The books are being set. In this case, there's however many books. 9 plus 2 is 11. We got 11 books. So the total pages is 4. And page size we set was, page size was set to 3 right here. Okay. Form submit is what we're going to do when we click the button, the search button. But maybe let's come back to form submit. And let's look at these next 3 functions here. Generate page numbers. If you were following along yesterday, this has not changed. Page numbers just creates an array of pages, 1, 2, 3, 4, however many are needed. It takes the total pages hook, which was set on page load, and it generates an array of page numbers. So, it'll say 1, element 0 will be 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth. So in this case, when the page loads, generate page numbers generates an array called page numbers with values of 1, 2, 3, and 4 in it. So this function returns 1, 2, 3, 4 inside of an array. Kind of hopping down to our underneath our books, these are where we see our page controls. And here we have a generate page numbers dot map. So again, this method right here returns the values 1, 2, 3, 4. And then for each one of those elements in the array, page number 1, we're going to put the number 1 inside of an li and run a little, hey, is the page number is 1 equal to current page? Now current page was set up in use effect, so current page is 1. Well, that's true the first time through. Okay, so this first element, this is a true statement, right? So we're setting the page item space active. So the LI will have a class of page item and a class of active, right? That's where you're going to get the blue background. Going back here, notice whichever one is active has a class of the active class. So it requires, anytime you have a map, it requires a key. This key is just, 1, 2, 3, 4, so it's easy to put the key as that's its unique value. Then we have a button, a class of page link. When you click the button, you call this function handle page change, and you pass the page number. Of course, in this case, it's the number 1. So let's look at handle page change. So again, when you click on the button, it calls this function and passes the number 1 into it, and then it displays the number 1 inside of the button. So let's look at this function, handle page change. We input the page number. We call fetch books, passing it page number of 1. Well, let's see here. The way this is, it's interesting because page 0, page 0 are our first 3 books. So page number 1 are our next 3 books. So if I were to log in users, okay, so here's our users. If I were to list all books, okay, page size of 3, click send. Okay, so we're just showing the first 3 books here. Da Vinci Code would be our first book. Now let's set the page number 1. Two. So if I were to set page number to 0, Da Vinci Code, page number 1. So here we're calling fetch books, page number 1. And obviously fetch books is going to return the books back with page number 1. So here, oh, we're already on 1. So when we click 2, okay, that's what it is. Okay, we're already on 1. You click 2, it's going to pass page number 2 in. Okay, that's all it is. I was thinking there was an off by 1, like an array kind of problem here, but it's not. You click 2, it passes in page number 2, so it gets you Great Gatsby 2. It's the same thing here. If I were to go to page number 2, Great Gatsby 2. Okay, so I was off by 1 myself, but suffice to say, this fetch books, we need to take a little bit closer look at fetch books. But that's basically what's handling here. When you click button number 2, it's going to say page number 2, handle page change on number 3, it'll pass in page number 3, so on and so forth, right? And that just returns a different subset of books. Okay? Now fetch books then, you can see fetch book takes in an object. These are our search params. And all we're doing is we're hitting our list with credentials of true. We're setting in our params. We're spreading params and setting a page size of 3. Right? So I think that's pretty straightforward here. Then the difference here, right, is that now we're writing this method so that we could also get a subset of books. Like so far we're just getting all the books, but now this method is flexible in that we could send in some search params and not get all the books. Granted, we haven't done that yet, but that's how we're also going to use this fetch books method. Okay, so for right now, it's like, hey, still getting all the books. You might, when you click this, you might send in a page number, and that changes the page number. Okay, which fetch books can handle that. Otherwise, we set the books to those books, set the total pages, kind of more of the same, and set the current page. If there's a page number, you set it to the params.page number. Otherwise, you set it to 1. Which is kind of what you would expect. Like if you do a search, like give me all the fiction books, you would expect the first page number to be 1. So if you're not setting a custom page number, which comes from the paging controls, you're setting it to page number 1. Okay, so now really the only thing that's left is to kind of take a little bit closer look at form submit. Form submit, notice this is a form event, and we're generating these variables which are coming from the controls on our form, right? So we made these different controls in our form. So kind of to go down to the HTML, I actually chopped this out of the video yesterday because it was in a kind of a buggy state until I fixed it afterwards. I made this form, right? The form, the submit handler is on form submit, and we have these different controls. Notice the ID here of search, the ID of min price, the ID of max price, the ID of genre, a drop-down list, and an ID, a drop-down list of sort. Okay, so you got to make these form controls so that when you submit the form, you could read from those form controls, generate a new search params object based on, either there's going to be values in here or they're going to be empty strings. Now, I also made a hook for my search params. So you're going to notice here I set my search params to that object, and then when I call fetch books, I send in the hook, page size of 3, page number of 1. Now that I'm looking at this, I'm not super confident that I needed this hook. I might have been able to get by without it, because I'm not sure that I use it anywhere else. I'm not sure why. I don't remember why I added that in. Suffice to say, what that allows me to do, right, is kind of come into here and say, okay, give me all the fiction books, right? And if I click search, now I get 2 pages of just my fiction. If I say give me all the nonfiction, I don't think I have nonfiction books, so I pointed this out. This is really not good, right? This should say, no books found is what this should say. But because of the way I've kind of written my where did I write this? It's just the way I wrote it in my book list. And here, this should really say, maybe I have to pass down my logged in user, and I say if the user is not logged in, right? So there's a difference between a logged in user and these books that are being filtered out. So, if there's no books, I should say no books based on your query. And if there's not a user, I should say please log in. So nonetheless, that's why when I filter out the books, it says please log in to see all books. Yet if I were to go back to add books, they're all still, we are logged in. And we can kind of tinker around with this, and I say minimum price of $5. How to code should be filtered out because my minimum price there, and a maximum price of $10. We should get rid of that one, right? Paging controls are working. in conjunction with the searching and the filtering and the sorting. So all these controls are playing nice together, which is nice. Of course, if you zero them all out, clicks that, sort by price, we get some sort of ascending price going up in our book list. Okay, so just wanted to kind of touch base on the code that kind of got that working. The last thing is kind of a redeployment. So now that I've got these working locally, I want to deploy again to Google Cloud both my back end and my front end. And so I'll go to my Retro Amazon backend first and take a look at my project ID and Google Cloud change project name. And so there is a in your terminal you have to set the project. So not change, set project in terminal. And so gcloud config set is the command we're looking for. So gcloud config set and then your project name. So here it is, gcloud config set project ID. So in my backend, I'm going to do gcloud, stop it. Yes, clear the screen. So I'm on my backend, gcloud config set project, and then paste in my project ID. Okay, and you got to make sure you're deploying your backend to your backend. Okay, I've made the mistake before of deploying my front end to my backend, and then it all comes crashing down, right? So anytime you're doing a deployment, just double check, right, that you're setting the right project. And then the command to deploy is, again, we've done the initial setup, but the command to now redeploy is pretty simple. gcloud app deploy. Okay, and that's going to be redeploying my backend. Now, before it deploys, it says, hey, you're deploying to this URL, Retro Amazon backend. Do you want to continue? I'm going to say yes. There was a video for you guys to initially deploy your front end, okay? And you're going to want to do that, walk through that video. Again, I've already done the initial deployment of my front end, so now I'm just going to redeploy it. But safe to say you have to redeploy both. So I'm just going to go through that process and then we'll be done for today. So I'll redeploy the back end, redeploy the front end. Anytime you're deploying, you should expect bugs, right? It never goes smooth. If it goes smooth, it's like a lucky day, right? So the backend's deployed, and I've got kind of like a dummy page here. If this dummy page comes up, it's a good thing. That means a successful deployment of my back end. Obviously, this is not my front end, so now I'm going to go to my front end, and kind of the same command, gcloud config set project, I believe. Let's double check. Okay, gcloud config set project and then the name of the project. So to the front end and to the project name, I'm going to go up here, Retro Amazon front end, copy the project ID. I'm on my front end, paste in Retro Amazon front end. Then it's the same deploy command. Now, when you watch the video, you'll see that I've got this app.yaml, slightly different, literally copy and paste this. You also need to run a build. right? So don't forget the build. So I'm going to say npm run build. So on the front end, you got this extra step that you don't have on the back end. So that recompiles our distribution index. You know, the one thing is that these are single page applications, right? So it is a single HTML page. And we got React Router that kind of simulates multiple pages, but at the end of the day, it is a single page app. And now we run gcloud app deploy. And double check our settings. We are deploying to the Retro Amazon front end, and we are on our front end. I'm going to hit yes to continue. And then we're going to see what breaks. Or if it's my lucky day. Anybody a fan of the comedian Tosh Point oh? He has a new podcast. It's really not appropriate for school, but it's a funny guy, right? And I was listening to his podcast this morning. He was talking about dead space on a podcast and just quiet, like nothing going on, just quiet, dead space. He was making fun of it. Whatever. I've got him in my video. Moving on. Look, it at least uploaded a deployed service to that URL. Okay, so we're getting the React app to pull up. This is good. Let's kind of pull up the console while we're at it. Of course, I would expect that. Log in. And we have our new paging controls. And we have everything kind of deployed on our live retroamazonfrontend.com. And we're getting our logged in users. Oh, look, we got a fun little cookie. Now, I will notice that, I will point it out. On localhost, this was able to pick up the cookies being sent. Those cookies are still being sent, and I can prove that, even though my plugin isn't able to read them. I can prove it by going to the inspect. Let's see, network, list, cookies. So here's my auth token that came from the server. So request cookies and response cookies. I do get this warning here. So maybe this warning is why my cookie isn't showing up. But nonetheless, if you log in as a user without permissions to list books, the permissions are still functioning and the cookies are still being sent, even though on deployment, that isn't showing up there. But nonetheless, controls are working. And if I search for timeless, searching, filtering, all the like is working and it's live. So I guess it's my lucky day. Deployment did not cause any crashes, and I'm going to let you guys get to work on some labs.
And there